What's up, Navigating Academia? This is your buddy, Dr. J. Phoenix Singh, coming at you to be able to answer a question that for some reason I've been getting a lot this week, so I figured I'd make a video on it for you guys. And this is an age-old question, and the question is, do psychologists need their own psychologist? Now, think about it. Does a lawyer need their own lawyer? Does a medical doctor need their own medical doctor? My argument when it comes to does a psychologist need their own psychologist is very simple. It's yes. Now, I remember being back in Argentina a number of years ago, going down there and doing a little lecture circuit at several universities in the Cordoba area. And I remember when I was there, a very dear friend of mine, he's a tenured professor, he's a little bit on the older side, retired now, he's emeritus. He told me that there's this saying in Argentina that loosely translates to, on Monday, I go shopping, on Tuesday, I visit my family, and on Wednesday, I go and see my therapist. It's just so ingrained in society there that this is something that is very healthy, and it's part of normal weekly structure, the normal weekly agenda, to be able to go and see a therapist. And sure enough, just like you're taking care of your physical health by eating healthy, by exercising on a regular basis, by getting enough sleep, also we need to make sure that we're taking care of our minds. Now, it's one of these very interesting things we can talk about at some stage about this mind-body connection, which sounds very fluffy, but is absolutely a real thing. And especially if it's something where you're going into graduate school, maybe you've graduated, you're a postdoc, you're an early career academic, and you're not tenured yet, these are situations that are very, very high stress. And the impact that stress can have, psychological stress, on your physical body and its functioning is gigantic. I'm actually thinking about making a video for you guys about the chronic stress-related conditions that physically you're likely to have at some stage in your career, unless you're taking really good care of yourselves. And you guys know that my priority is making sure that you succeed in your field, in your chosen career path, and that you do it with as much joy as you can and as little stress as possible. Even though life is stressful, careers are stressful, and being a psychologist is stressful. And that's why it's important to be able to have your own psychologist or your own therapist. They can be an MA counselor, they can be somebody who's a licensed clinical social worker, they can be a psychiatrist who's just phenomenal at talk therapy as well, or they can be a fellow psychologist. I've even seen folks like psychiatric nurses who are incredibly talented in this regard. There's a lot of different individuals who are within the field of behavioral health who can help you work through ongoing issues in your life. And remember, we know from the work of seminal individuals like Carl Rogers, that just because you're not a therapist yourself, let's say that you're watching this video and you're not a psychologist, it doesn't mean that you can't have a positive therapeutic impact on the people in your life who you love. Sometimes people will tell me that they want to be a psychologist, but they don't want to go to graduate school, or they think that it's too late for them and so forth, but they tell me that they love helping people. And I tell them, you don't have to be a psychologist to be able to do that, to have a positive impact on other people's mental health. Simply using reflective listening, spending quality time with people, being empathic, and so forth is going to do a tremendous amount of good for other people's mental health. Now, let's say that you do decide that you want to go and be a psychologist, though. So why is it that you do need your own psychologist or your own therapist? Well, there's a few reasons. I'm always brought back to this quote that maybe you guys have heard about a lawyer, right? And it's a lawyer who represents himself as a fool for a client. That is the quote. Psychologists, it's so funny, and I can attest to this myself. We can know so much about different conditions. We can know everything about somatoform disorders. And yet when we experience chronic pain somewhere that's not due to a structural issue, at the end of the day, that's something that we call a psychogenic condition, right? So a somatoform disorder. For us to be able to heal ourselves is incredibly difficult, even though we may know so much about it. Same thing if we find ourselves dissociating because we're going through a lot of stressful life events. We may know everything about grounding techniques. We may, be certified in EMDR, and the idea that, we're actually doing these things to ourselves just doesn't seem to be working for whatever reason. I can tell you that as a psychologist, it can get very frustrating sometimes when we're going through the normal ups and downs of life, and at the same time can't seem to be able to give ourselves, or to be able to take certainly, our own advice. And so because of this, it is very important to be able to have an objective third party. Your friends and your family love you so much, and because of that, they're going to do their best to be able to give you advice, but it's going to be implicitly biased. No matter how much they want to give you that objective advice. So it's important to be able to have someone who is an objective third party. This is the reason why many of you guys, I have the blessing of you guys booking sessions with me, because I'm an objective third party that can give you objective advice about your career, about your major life decisions in terms of a career path that you may want to choose. And you guys, of course, can book a session with me by visiting the website down here below. But this is something where that's a great joy for me to be that objective third party for so many of you guys. So here's the thing. There's something within the field of psychology that we call, being a psychologist, that we refer to as vicarious traumatization. Some people also call it secondary victimization. The idea here is that when you're a psychologist, like for me, forensic psychologist, I remember my first clinical position, which was in Switzerland at this place called the Poschwies. It was a max security forensic hospital that was located within a max security prison. And the thing is that the clients that I had been convicted of some very serious crimes. Serial homicide, serial sexual abuse, some very, very severe crimes. And this is a major thing when you have never experienced hearing about incredibly severe trauma. Individuals with 76 counts of child abuse and molestation. Individuals who are very high profile, who've murdered people. Individuals who are deeply psychopathic, and when they talk to you about their crimes, clearly have no remorse whatsoever, and genuinely just no empathy. When you end up encountering clients like this, and you don't happen to be an individual who has that kind of a history, it can be very jarring and very alarming, especially if you're early career and this is the first time you're experiencing things like this. But even if it's something where you're late career, this kind of secondary victimization, this kind of vicarious trauma that we're experiencing by hearing about the trauma that our clients are undergoing, it can really rub off on us. And if we're not actively processing, just like we have process for our clients, if we're not actively in process to be able to discharge those emotions that are essentially being put onto us, it doesn't have an additive effect. It has a multiplicative effect. This is this logarithmic exponential distribution to the point where you may not even realize this is happening to you, and then all of a sudden, these symptoms can begin appearing in you. Not only mental health symptoms, but also physical health symptoms as well. You may get lower back pain, you may get neck pain, you may get chronic tension headaches, you may have pain in your legs. There's all sorts of things that can happen that you're going to think are due to a structural problem. Maybe you went for a run and you didn't feel that you twisted anything, but then your leg hurts. Then, okay, classic medicine's going to tell you, well, there's something wrong with your leg then. But now what we end up knowing more and more is the literature on neurology ends up proceeding, right? What we know is that a lot of this chronic pain, if it lasts beyond several months, about 3 months, a lot of that pain is actually due to neuronal pathways having been established via something like Pavlovian. So Hebbian conditioning in our brains that is basically reactivating that pain circuit chronically. So when it comes to something, diagnoses like sciatica, fibromyalgia, and so forth, if you have one of these diagnoses, but you've been to the doctor, there's no structural issues going on, the likelihood is very high that you've got something like mind-body syndrome, so MBS, which you guys can look into, or attention myositis syndrome, which is essentially the same thing. And this is just another way, basically, of saying it's a psychosomatic condition. The pain is real. However, even though the pain is real, it's not due to a physical cause. All right, and this storing up of all this trauma can result in that. And so you really need to be active at the boundary, as Gestalt psychologists would say, in terms of in real time combating all of this trauma that's being placed on us by our clients, okay? Now, our clients aren't traumatizing us, right? They're not attacking us or anything like this. Of course not, right? But it is certainly the situation where listening to their histories of trauma, like I said, can result in this vicarious traumatization of ourselves, okay? The next reason we all need a psychologist is burnout prevention. This is an incredibly stressful job, and everybody has their breaking point. I like to think that I'm a pretty resilient guy. I've been through a lot in my life, good times and a lot of bad times, and I can tell you that I've had to learn to be very resilient, have a very thick skin in my life and in my career as well. And everyone's going to go through these things. Life can be very challenging sometimes. But it's very important that despite how resilient any of us may be, seeing a psychologist or a therapist of some sort can still provide us with a very strong set of protective factors so that when ish does go down, we actually are going to be able to bounce back more quickly. And this is especially important for our clients because if we burn out, and burnout feels horrific. It's happened to me 2 times in my life. It's really, really severe, and it's very, very bad. For me, the first time that it happened was after about 2.5 years of working 7 days a week. In the end, I worked over 1,000 days straight. And it was just really brutal. It was really brutal. And when the entire thing kind of came to a close, I had all kinds of physical health problems. I was definitely depressed. I had anxiety problems and so forth. And this is burnout. It's absolutely terrible. And then the other time was more recently, again, after working, in that case, 346 days straight. Incredibly stressful. And ironically, all these dormant pathways, these pain pathways that have been established the first time stopped being dormant and got reactivated. And all of a sudden, I was in a very high level of pain for quite some time because psychologically, I wasn't actively processing those emotions. So it's very important. Psychologists aren't perfect. Psychologists don't have all the answers. It's like a medical doctor who, at the end of the day, isn't able to always diagnose themselves, or a lawyer who ends up running some stop signs or some stoplights and getting a ticket, right? This is the exact same thing for psychologists. We have to be so strong for our clients, and of course, if we end up burning out, the idea that we would have to stop process with them and shift our clients over to someone else in the interim while we heal is not something that any of us truly wants. I'm sure you can appreciate. The next thing in terms of why to have a psychologist is that all psychologists are human beings. We have our own lives, or at least I pray we have our own lives. We have a partner, we have a spouse, we have children, we have a dog, we have parents, we have crazy family members just like everybody else does, right? We have money problems like everybody else does. We're trying to explore our faith like everybody is in some way, shape, or form. We're trying to stay healthy and stave off weight gain and all that kind of stuff. Trying to get enough sleep. We're human beings, right? And we have personal life problems just like everybody else does. And like I said, right, physician heal thyself is another quote, right? This is the same thing. If you're a psychologist, yes, the likelihood is very high that you're going to be able to intellectualize and understand what's going on with yourself. But to be able to treat it, we need somebody else there with us, all right? And yes, of course, we can rely on friends, we can rely on family, we can rely on our partner or our spouse, but the objective piece, right? The objectivity that a therapist brings to bear is very important and incredibly useful. So the final thing that I'll say is running a private practice. Let's say you run a private practice. It's incredibly stressful. So many of you I've worked with to be able to build your private practices, especially when you're just getting started. And a lot of the times people going into private practice assume that they're going to be making a huge amount of money immediately, not realizing or not doing any kind of competitive market analysis to realize just how many therapists there are in your area with similar expertise, except they've been in the game for a long time. They've got a whole referral network that's going because of their current clients and past clients. They have more money to be able to put into sales and marketing efforts online. And so because of this, they end up being the first individuals who end up getting contacted. So if there's anybody who just thinks, hey, I'm going to have my private practice in my first year, I'm almost guaranteed to be able to make over $100,000, so 6 figures here in the US, that's going to be really challenging. Am I saying it's impossible? I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that the number of times that I've seen it done versus not, the ratio there is imbalanced. So At the end of the day, trying to run your own private practice is just like starting up any business, like starting a publication academy for me. It was a very stressful process, and it's definitely one of those things where, particularly if it's a private practice where you're kind of going it alone, there's not other people around. You can't afford to be able to hire a assistant. Maybe it's something where, you join somebody else's private practice, but then, of course, it's restricting your ability to kind of run your practice however you desire, right? There's all these factors that come to bear. And at the end of the day, this is something where sometimes it can feel like the amount of resources we have to get the job done, it's not that what you actually need in terms of resources is perceived to be a bit more. It's like a challenge. We can perceive it to be a threat. So the actual number of resources we need are up here. And that distance can seem insurmountable. And this can generate a lot of inner conflict and stress, a lot of questioning, are we doing the right thing? And so because of that, it's a great idea to be able to go and see a psychologist, or even to be able to hire somebody who's more of a business coach like I am, who's been there, done that, and so forth. So for me, this is why all psychologists need a psychologist. All therapists need a therapist. Just like all medical doctors need a medical doctor, and just like all lawyers need a lawyer. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.